Hey guys, a while ago I got myself something that everyone who is serious about woodworking needs in their workshop. It's a table saw, and last weekend I finally took it out of its box and put it together. It would have been nice if the user manual included clear assembly instructions, but anyway, after a couple of hours and some trial and error, I had a working table saw. Now, this particular table saw is just a cheap entry-level model, and as such it is not suitable for big sophisticated projects, especially if great precision is mandatory. But with its ability to make basic repeatable cuts, it was good enough to help me build a simple storage cabinet for my home. Last year I took apart my old kitchen since it was already due for renovation after a decade of service. Because of this, my stash was full of pieces of particle board which were still usable. I just needed to cut them to suitable sizes. Here's a sketch of what I wanted to make. Basically, I needed a storage cabinet that could fit in about 45 by 35 centimeters of space. Since it was only going to be used for storing winter shoes and maybe a few smaller tools, I decided to make each compartment 30 centimeters in height. All of the smaller horizontal pieces I cut on the table saw. It was good practice, and the cuts I made were very accurate even though I had never used a table saw before. Unfortunately, the solid side pieces that I needed were too big to cut on the table saw, so I had to cut them with a jigsaw. Once I had all the pieces cut to size, it was time to start assembling the cabinet. I first took the bottom piece and drilled 6 pilot holes where the screws would go. Since this particle board is 18 mm thick, I drilled the holes 9 mm away from the edge of the piece, so that the screw would go in straight through the middle of the side piece. I used long 5 cm wood screws for the job, and I also used some of my corner clamps to keep the pieces in place. After driving in the 3 screws, I confirmed with a square that the pieces were properly aligned. All was looking good, so I moved on to the next side piece, and finally added the top piece. The frame of the cabinet was starting to look very good very quickly. This is what the legs for the cabinet look like. They get screwed in from the bottom and can be adjusted in height, which is ideal because the floor where the cabinet is going to go isn't perfectly leveled. Once the frame was assembled, I added the legs to the bottom piece, making sure that they are placed equally close to the corners. I want to bring your attention to the way the sides and the bottom pieces are laid out in my design. Notice how the heavy side piece rests on top of the bottom one, so that its weight is properly supported. Joining the 2 side pieces like so would be a bad idea because all the weight of the cabinet and everything stored on it would rest on only a few screws. The whole thing might hold up at first, but simply won't be very strong. Before moving forward, I adjusted the 4 legs so that the bottom was perfectly leveled. To mount the 3 remaining horizontal pieces, I made myself a simple jig. I took a scrap piece of board and drilled a hole 30 cm away from the narrow edge and 4 cm away from the long one. This allowed me to drill 4 pilot holes in the side pieces at perfectly equal height. The holes were for the screws that were going to hold the horizontal pieces. However, the hole in the scrap piece had to be 9 mm higher to account for the thickness of the board, but it was too late when I realized my mistake. Fortunately, being off by just 9 mm wasn't critical in my case. To support the horizontal piece while it was being screwed in place, I cut a piece of scrap board to a length of exactly 29.1 centimeters. Then I screwed in the horizontal piece from both sides. It was a perfect fit. Following the same workflow, I installed the other 2 horizontal pieces. Because of my mistake, the top compartment ended up a few centimeters taller, but it was only barely noticeable. The final step was to add the back panels to the cabinet. These were simply pieces of thin fiberboard that I salvaged from the old kitchen. And since these pieces were very thin, I could easily cut them with my handsaw. Then I simply attached them to the back of the cabinet using basic nails. And this is how this project came together. This isn't the most beautiful cabinet that I could have built, but it is functional and it cost me only a day of work since it was made entirely out of salvaged materials. Plus, I finally got to use my table saw. Let me know in the comments below if you liked this project. or if you think that there's something I could have done better. And subscribe to my channel to never miss any of my future videos.